At 6:30 p.m., I'll take a roll call of the trustees present. Trustee Linden?
Here.
Trustee Bretz?
Here.
Trustee Bashaw?
Yeah, here.
Trustee Johnston?
Yes.
Trustee Powell? Okay, now we'll move on to the next section, please.
This portion of the meeting is for public comment. Any member of the public wishing to speak, once recognized, shall stand at the microphone and state their name and address. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes if speaking for themselves, or 5 minutes if speaking on behalf of a group. I will ask the speakers to refrain from remarks that are in poor taste, slanderous, or not germane to any action taken or contemplated by the board.
Is there anybody who would like to address the board, please? Is there anybody else who would like to address the board? Please step forward.
Good evening, everyone. Matt Dangelo on behalf of CSEA. I'm also a SUNY Fredonia alumni, so I have benefited from the services that I'm going to be discussing, and I appreciate your time. Thank you, Mayor and board members. I also, in addition to me being a labor relations specialist for CSEA, I am the chief negotiator during the current contract negotiations for CSEA. I have no day-to-day involvement whatsoever with the operations or labor relations of this unit. My entire mandate is this contract. That's the entirety of my interests here. We take great offense at we're only here for negotiations. I read the media just like everybody else does, and I saw the comments, and it is not only false but very offensive. If that was the truth, if we were only here for contract negotiations, this wouldn't be my first time commenting publicly or addressing the board whatsoever. This is the first time I think everybody here has seen me in person, so that will portray my point clearly. I don't negotiate in public or through the media, and I never will, nor does CSEA. That's not how we do our business, and we never will. Simply, I'm here to convey on behalf of my membership and CSEA that we take great issue with the implication of how CSEA feels about its members or cares about its members. We're in the middle of a contract negotiation, as we speak, and we're being publicly lambasted in the media and in open session. The dysfunction of this board has not only affected our negotiations, but it's more importantly affecting the services that my members provide to the residents of this community. And that's our focus at CSEA. CSEA has one priority, like I just said, and that's to provide high quality services to the residents and do their jobs, put their heads down, and have a good working relationship with management. We are not in the business of going back and forth in public, and this will be the last time I address this. But CSEA remains focused on these negotiations, and we're also able to differentiate between the two issues. We ask the board to do the same. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matt. Anybody else like to address the board?
Hi again, Jill Ackerman, CSEA. Want to make some comments and address some comments regarding last week's trustee workshop. Once again, these are public meetings. The public watches, and as I stated before, we are here to create a better labor relations atmosphere. We're here to work for the residents and with you all. Last time we were here, we addressed the unprofessionalism of some board members, and unfortunately, we're continuing to deal with these unprofessional behaviors.
Point of order, Mayor. What does this have to do with tonight's agenda?
I will happily explain.
Continue.
Thank you. This past Friday, village employee turned in his resignation. When he handed it in, he was greeted with a rude snatching, I quote that word, out of his hand and told goodbye. Later that afternoon, same employee received an alert from his camera on his home. There was a police escort with the village personnel specialist. Why? Why was she there? Apparently she was there to deliver a letter to let him know that his time was being denied. That constitutes a public police escort. Not only is it embarrassing for our members, but it is a waste of taxpayer resources. let me talk about the ethos. This village board is held to a standard as elected officials in your code of conduct to maintain professional behaviors. Last week, another too bad by a trustee. Correct First Amendment rights. Correct elected official. We are trying to help the public, this village, function, and we're trying to do our jobs. When we are continually talked about in public session of a negative view, that's not helping relations, nor is it helping the public. If you have personal feelings about our members, talk about that in executive session. Don't talk about it in the public. That's all we're asking. Social media. It's become pretty hot around the village. We don't want the attention. I'm guessing you don't want the attention. However, we've been accused of cherry-picking statements, and the word contextomy. So what I've done is I've printed.
That's 3 minutes.
I'm speaking on behalf of the public, and I have about 30 seconds left. Is that okay?
What public?
I'm sorry, of the
The
group.
group? Okay.
Yes. So what I've done is I've printed out the text messages that are of question so that you can see that things were not cherry-picked. Thank you.
Sure. Is there anybody else that'd like to address the board?
Sit down, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay with you.
Chip, can you use that?
I haven't been asked to attend this meeting by any trustee, any individual, by any union employee, but I'm here because I'm concerned about the procedures that are being undertaken by the village board. And again, I'm not here to chastise anybody individually. I think some of these things are unintentional, but they're serious because the elected officials and appointed officials take oaths of office when they enter their duties to obey the Constitution of the state of New York and the laws of the state of New York. Our charter is a law of the state of New York. We have a charter. It didn't come directly from the village. Our charter came from the state of New York. We have in the village over the years amended it many, many times. So I have three basic concerns. I'll try to get through it with the 3 minutes, but I would hope that an arbitrary 3 minutes doesn't hold me from completing what I have to say because it's important. I don't really want to be here tonight, but I feel it's important for me to say what I'm going to say. And if I mention a trustee's name, it's not to chastise him. I want to make that clear. It's to correct what I think is an improper procedure. At the trustees meeting of May 24th, Trustees Linden said, among other things, that changes had been made to the village code at the village retreat. One of the changes, he alleged, was an establishment of a management committee. The Observer quotes Trustee Bayshaw replying to him that there were no decisions made at the retreat, end quote. However, at the June 28th meeting of the board, Trustee Bayshaw stated that an auditor found that the village needed updated security devices, and she is quoted as stating, quote, so the management committee began to seek quotes. That indicates to me that a management committee was in existence. Even if a resolution establishing the management committee was adopted, it would be contrary to our village charter and without any legal effect. And by the way, I was reviewing the village charter, and I noticed in 1996, the mayor at that time was Mayor Pagano, and I was village attorney who went through the legal procedures to enact the code of the Village of Fredonia. The direct managers of the various village departments are the department heads, police chief, the DPW supervisor, the chief operators of the wastewater treatment plant, the water treatment plant, and the fire chief. The overall managers of the village are the Board of Trustees, the elected officials of our village, as set forth in the village charter, not appointed employees. If the department head has a problem that requires advice or direction, he or she will bring the matter to the attention of the mayor or village board for resolution, not to a committee of village employees. My question to the village board is, at what village board meeting was a resolution establishing the management committee adopted? I could not find that in any of the agendas. Also, what persons comprise this committee? What are their duties and how does it function? Can someone produce this resolution from the official minutes of our village which established the management committee? As I stated, even if it was adopted, it would still be contrary to our charter. Second issue that I have is that the organization chart that was recently adopted, I think you've all seen it, shows a committee designated, quote, committee assigned trustees, end quote. The village does not have such a committee, and putting it in an organization chart does not create the committee. An organization chart is nothing more than a skeleton representation of village government. It's not the law. The chart shows that the Board of Trustees appoints such a committee, and the committee appears to consist of the village clerk, treasurer, and personnel specialists. However, the functions and duties and operation of the committee are not spelled out, creating confusion. Further, this chart was never discussed in public at an open meeting or at a workshop session. The organization chart, especially the committee assigned, which states a committee of assigned trustees, misrepresents the village government and is contrary to our village charter, as it appears to show an unlawful delegation of the powers of the mayor and the Board of Trustees. These are the people who are our elected officials, not appointed employees. This chart should be repealed as soon as possible. Regarding the transfer of the meter reader to the water plant, to my knowledge, no resolution was adopted by the village board authorizing this transfer. The same applies to the secretary at the street department. Was a decision made in executive session regarding these transfers? If so, it would violate the open meetings law. Only the village board can authorize such transfers, and that can only be accomplished by a village board resolution duly adopted at an open meeting and entered into the official minutes of the village. Who gave the meter reader the order to report to the water plant? And who gave the order to the secretary at the DPW to report to the building inspector's office at Village Hall? And by what specific authority did they have to say, to give those orders? What authority was given to them by the board? That authority, if it was going to be given, should be in an open meeting, open to the public, not behind closed doors. Those transfers should be rescinded. The last meeting that I spoke, I hope I'm not going over this, I'm sure I have gone over it by now. The retreat, which was scheduled for 3 hours, is very likely, in my mind, that village business was discussed. It wasn't just a lecture one way. I'm sure the board in 3 hours must have had some discussion amongst themselves. Once that takes place, it should have stopped and should have called a regular meeting and discussed it in an open meeting, not behind closed doors. And I'd just like to read, the other thing is that calling it a retreat apparently seems to close the door to anybody knowing what went on. And to double down on that, the attorney for the village states there was attorney-client privilege. So it's further secretive, so that the whole thing is secretive for two reasons. It's a retreat and attorney-client privilege. Well, I've been attorney for a few years for the Village of Fredonia. Very rarely did I exercise the right of attorney-client privilege. It's only given, the most case it would be given would be litigation, contractual contests, or matters concerning personnel. There's no reason why that retreat should have been open to the public, on public access, so that people could see if the law firm was telling the village trustees how the village operates. That information should be provided to all our taxpayers and residents of the village. And last point on that, I understand the village paid about $2,000 for this service. If the taxpayers pay $2,000 to have attorneys give a retreat, shouldn't the taxpayers be able to hear what advice is being given regarding our government? Thank you, Mayor, Board.
Thank you, Sam. Is there anybody else that'd like to address the board?